I know there's been heartache and there's been some frustration in terms of our of where we've been in the playoffs lately. It's a hard league, but this team has put themselves in a position, and we're going to try to keep putting ourselves in a position to keep knocking on the door, keep knocking on the door, keep knocking on the door, and eventually push through.
Maple Leafs GM Brad Treliving is officially on the clock as a former Maple Leafs head coach is back in the NHL. Hey everyone, welcome into another SUN Sports Roundtable. Rob Wong joined alongside by Toronto Sun Sports columnist Steve Simmons and Toronto Sun Maple Leafs writer Terry Koshan. And guys, Brad Treliving was officially introduced as Maple Leafs GM on Friday and did plenty of media as everyone is trying to get a sense of what he'll be doing this summer. Steve, what was your biggest takeaway after hearing from the new Maple Leafs GM?
Well, my takeaway was that he's very comfortable in his own skin, and he's very comfortable being in Toronto's can be an intimidating place first time for a new general manager. And what I liked is there was no Brian Burke act like we saw when Brian Burke came in. There was no John Ferguson stumble all over his own words the way we saw it when John Ferguson took over. I don't think we learned anything about what kind of team he's going to have, what kind of changes he's going to have, how he views the Maple Leafs, big picture. But I think we saw a guy who's comfortable in his own skin, has been around long enough to be professional. And that's nice to see from that perspective.
Yeah, I'm curious to see I agree with Steve on that. I'm curious to see how that impacts what he does going forward. Because, even Kyle Dubas, it took him a while to get comfortable in that position. And I'm not sure that he was 100% that way when it ended for him. He might have been close to it, but Treliving, there was no sense of anything other than that when he was introduced to us last week. And like I say, we'll see we'll see where that how that factors going forward. But I think it's key to remember the takeaway for me was just coming in and saying, okay, look, I'm just going to evaluate everything here, talk to the people I need to talk to right away. Clearly, no rash decisions are going to be made. I think we learned in Pittsburgh, Kyle Dubas fired 3 people in the front office, more or less within hours of taking over. And I know he has more power there to do those sorts of things, but I don't get the sense that's going to happen with Treliving. I think it would have happened by now, but he's going to get out and talk to Austin Matthews. He's had those initial conversations with Sheldon Keefe, and important just to settle the waters, if you will, because we all know what's been going on here in the past few weeks and all the speculation about everything. But I just like the way that it went as an initial first impression.
Well, the thing that I thought about after the fact was when someone asked about the core 4, he says, this isn't about the core 4, this is about the team. And then he said, what's your first order of business? Oh, I'm going to go see Austin Matthews in Arizona. So
he's got to. Right?
I'm not saying he doesn't have to. I'm just saying it's funny to say it's not about the core 4. But guess what? I'm going to see number 1 on the core 4 list.
We know what's about the core 4. Like, he can say anything he wants in that regard, but I kind of get what he's. If you look at the roster as a whole, I think he's going to do something on the blue line fairly significant, right? So I guess what he's saying is it's not just about the core 4 I have to think about. It's about other things here, but obviously Austin Matthews is not 1A. He's 1, period. Go talk to him.
Meanwhile, Terry, former Maple Leafs head coach Mike Babcock is reportedly returning to the NHL. He's set to become the new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets at the end of the month when his contract expires. How surprised are you that Babs is back in the NHL?
Not really. I didn't really buy it when he said a year ago or whenever it was that he is retired or however he put it. I thought that he would have thought that I still have things to do in the National Hockey League. It's been a long time since he won anything, and I think obviously there's an opportunity here for him to kind of come back now and prove that he is growing as a coach and as a person, because we all know what happened when he left Toronto. Not only the things that came out of the dressing room here, but also in Detroit and other places, and a lot of the criticism he took and how he handled players at times. So, I'm curious to see what if it's a new and improved Mike Babcock in Columbus, but kind of led to believe that Jarmo Kekalainen saw some things in interviewing him that would lead him to believe that he can be that way, new and improved. And we'll see how it goes in Columbus. But it's interesting because Columbus is not really that close, and we'll see where it goes with that roster. But Mike Babcock back in the NHL, I'm not overly surprised by it.
Columbus has done some interesting things over the years. Not always right things, but interesting things. They had Ken Hitchcock coaching there. Then they had John Tortorella coaching there. And now they're kind of doing a little back to the future here with Mike Babcock. if they're getting the Mike Babcock who went from Anaheim to Detroit way back when, they're getting a pretty good coach. If they're getting the Mike Babcock who spent his last year in Toronto, thinking more about Mike Babcock than he did about anything else, then they're not getting a guy that's going to help them a whole lot. What's interesting there is they're getting an early draft pick, just like he got with Austin Matthews, and he had Marner as rookies. Maybe the best he coached in Toronto was that team the first year when all those guys were rookies, and he took them to the playoffs, and they gave Washington all they could handle in that first round. If they get that Babcock, they're getting something special. But if they get the guy from later on, he will not help that team. He'll be tripping over his own ego and himself. And that's an interesting team because Gaudreau is there and Laine's there, and now they're going to get probably Fantilli. And that's going to be a team to look at. Whether he's the guy to get them to the next level is interesting. And we saw what he did early on in Toronto. And that's the Mike Babcock I think they're looking at.
Well, we'll see. It's even his first year here when they didn't, finish last overall, you could see the improvements were coming with that team. And it culminated to a degree with the following year, because I think a lot of us still thought they weren't going to make the playoffs, and yet they take Washington 6 games. You know what? I'll wait to see it and see what comes out of it. It's and see how much he has changed. But we're not going to know right away, right? It's going to take a while to see how these things play out, and it's curious too, because I know that, as Steve kind of alluded to, he loved being in the big market here and that attention that it brought. Columbus isn't a big market; doesn't bring that attention. So maybe that's a change already, that he's okay with that sort of thing, and he's not going to be in New York or another high-profile city. He's in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, this is his last shot.
Yeah,
this is his chance.
Although, yeah.
And when you look at the NHL, who's playing in the Stanley Cup Final? Bruce Cassidy, fired a year ago in Boston. Paul Maurice basically fired himself in Winnipeg a year ago. They're in the Stanley Cup. These going back to the future coaches are now having success. Pete DeBoer in the semifinals again with the Dallas Stars. So the trend right now is, let's look at guys who are experienced rather than necessarily bring in new people. And I think, there's a little bit of safety in that, knowing what you know, as opposed to bringing in someone that you're not certain about.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure.
Yeah, it should be an interesting season, to say the least, in Columbus. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For Steve Simmons and Terry Koshan, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time on another SUN Sports Roundtable.